So I think it's really important because we were talking about relationship and vulnerability. And I think one thing that happens is that people take things personally. Hi, welcome back this week to The Naked Doctor. I'm Dr. Tammy.
I'm Dr. Debbie.
And we are the doctors.
Doctors.
We have a great show for you today. Primetime television, right? We can actually talk about some kind of risque things a little bit. So that's going to be sort of the nature of the show. So if you are a little embarrassed by things or you don't want to hear about that, this might not be the right show for you to tune into.
But you should hear about it.
So at the end, we're going to talk about 3 ways to restore intimacy to your relationships. What relationship is. You know, back in the day, cheating was an aspect of, we could define that. Nowadays, how do we define that with social media and messaging and texting? And what is, where is that boundary and where's that line? So we're going to talk about a few of those things. So 1/3 of women over the age of 30 report a sexual drought. So when we talk about drought, we're talking about more than 6 months without intimacy.
Coincides with hormone decline as well.
It does, absolutely it does. So we're going to talk a little bit about that too. Yeah. Thanks for that little shameless plug. And so of those women, they say that the biggest issues they think that bring that about are too busy or stress. We always make excuses, right? I always say, if you want something, you find a way. If you don't, you find an excuse.
Right.
Body image is a big thing, and that's about the age we're taking care of children and we're not really thinking about ourselves so much or taking care of ourselves. And boredom. Boredom. So we're going to talk about some ways to spice things up a little bit. This is interesting too. 86% of couples report a drought at some point in their life. And there was a study at the University of Toronto that said 1/4 of couples over 50 don't have intimacy at all, or sex at all. Intimacy maybe, but sex at all. And so we're going to talk about some of those reasons, and a lot of that comes into play, medical reasons and things as we age as well. So we're going to talk about those, and you want to stay tuned, especially all the way through the show today, because at the end we're going to talk about 3 ways you can restore intimacy in your life. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to The Naked Doctor. I'm Dr. Tammy.
I'm Dr. Debbie.
So when we talk about intimacy and long-term relationships, I think the media is a big thing with that, because we're bombarded with these images, and sometimes my son, he's 17, he asked me the other day, and it's like a single mom, it's like, you hate to have these conversations, but he's like, Mom, what do you think of pornography? And I'm like, deer in the headlight, I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, are we going there?
I think you should
Can you call your
it.
dad? So, I told him, I said, I think that gives a false sense, and I'm not judging it, good or bad. People are going to do what they're going to do, and, it maybe has its place, but I just think that gives a false sense. And so a lot of times one of the things that women report is a lack of self-confidence, because you can't compete with the the photoshopped,
It's unrealistic.
unrealistic lights,
Yeah.
camera, action kind of stuff. And
Right.
so it's very unrealistic. So I think one thing is just kind of not comparing. And, especially as we age a little bit, we can't compare ourselves to the industry and
Even to
younger
ourselves
people.
20 years ago.
No, absolutely not. A couple of things that really cause that loss of that loving feeling is a lack of focus on the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens with time is just that we sort of get so busy with so many other things.
We prioritize perhaps in a way that's not healthy for maintenance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And puppy love and all that stuff in the beginning, it's all exciting, and they call that the love bombing
It's not
phase.
sustainable, though.
It's not sustainable. And I really think what it comes down is compatibility. When you're talking about long-term
Right.
relationships and really sticking, they say opposites attract, and I don't think that's true at all, because what seems like kind of cute in the beginning and like later it's like they're smacking their cereal. It's like that was kind of cute in the beginning, or snoring. That was cute in the beginning, and it's not so
Not
cute
anymore.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting too, because we have like this hormonal reptilian brain. And so the question has always been, are humans meant for monogamy? Are they meant to mate for life? And the reason I think that question comes up is because we really beat ourselves up about, staying the course with something when it just doesn't fit anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are advantages to that. We were talking about, is it penguins? Penguins
Yes.
mate for life.
Yes.
And I say all the time when I see those elderly couples come in, and sometimes they're not even married anymore, but they're supporting each other because they need that support. And I say that's why, God made relationships that as we age, we need someone to take care of us. Not so much take care of us, but we need that compatibility, companionship, and that support.
And it's still intimacy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you
Kind of
define
redefine it.
intimacy?
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of redefinitions that come with, like kind of we mentioned when we were talking before, was what are those new boundaries, in the age of social media, and, what is a physical breach? Have you defined communication? Have you defined what that, lapse in the relationship can be? Is it okay to have an emotional affair, an emotional connection with someone, or is it only the physical?
Purely physical.
And only you know that, and only your relationship knows that. So we talked about lack of focus on relationship, hang-ups. We hear about that a lot, hang-ups. What's a hang-up, And I think a hang-up is just merely a narrative that you were taught very young, that seems good or bad, and really only you and your relationship can define good or bad. But I think a lot of times people take in a relationship and they don't talk about it in the beginning,
Right.
or before they even first consummate that. And I think that there's an interesting thing with novelty versus comfort.
Mm-hmm. Familiarity.
Yeah, we want both. And so when he surprises you with something, they say that for women the brain is the biggest sex organ, because we have to be connected
Right.
before.
I think for some men as well.
Yeah.
So you can't be negative and hateful to each other all day
Yeah,
and then anticipate anything other than.
yeah. And I hear that sometimes
It's
with couples
mental.
that I see. Usually I get the women in because of the menopause hormones and things
Right.
like that. And then I always address testosterone with the women, because there is this thought out there in the community, of the medical community, that there's nothing you can do for libido for women or for erectile dysfunction in women. And that's totally not true. You can give them hormone balance and testosterone.
Exactly.
And they do very, very well with it. I always say I can make you want him, but I can't make you like him. So that kind of goes down to that, just that connection. And there's a hormone called oxytocin.
Yes.
That's the relationship hug, cuddle is what mamas get with their babies. And so that connection, I think more so in women, but maybe in men. I think men have a little more trouble being vulnerable, but I think that oxytocin can often be created in that vulnerable space.
Yeah, it lends a decrease in stress and all the other hormones that flood along with that.
Oh,
They're very
sure.
important to your
Adrenaline,
general
cortisol,
health.
Yeah. A couple other things would be the hormonal decline, medication side effects, blood pressure medications, because
Right.
it lowers the blood pressure to the other organs.
Yes.
Cholesterol meds, because it blocks the cholesterol is actually a pro-hormone that makes testosterone.
Right.
And mood, depression medications, which can decrease the sympathetic, parasympathetic flow to those areas. Stress, we talked about that, cortisol, oxytocin. Smoking, erectile dysfunction is huge with smoking, affects the blood vessels.
Vasoconstriction, just like sugar. We've spoken about sugar. Sugar also impacts your vasculature, and not just vasculature to your feet. You mentioned that diabetics have feet problems. There are a lot of things peripheral to your pancreas that the sugar's impacting.
Bad backs, chronic pain, that's a thing I
Right.
hear from patients a lot. I just can't because I hurt. With sugar also causing inflammation and pain is a problem. Alcohol.
Yes.
Alcohol's a big thing.
It is.
It just will shut everything down. And so if somebody starts drinking in the early evening and then they expect to be intimate later, it's kind of a vicious cycle, and then years go by, and I think alcohol really contributes to a lot of that. And then fatigue, just being freaking tired, just your life spent in so many other directions.
Yeah, and like you said, it starts in your 30s. It's when your kids are their busiest, and then you've set up a pattern for later, too.
For sure. All right, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the benefits of having intimacy in your life. We'll be right back.
I have osteoarthritis, and the arthritis medication that you get regularly will cause your kidney function to go down, and my kidney function had started going down, and so I knew I needed to do something different. I've been seeing Dr. Tammy for about 3 months, and she's been doing stem cells in my knees, and it's like a miracle. She absolutely hits it every time in the correct spot, and I am pain-free now, and I haven't been pain-free for about 10 years. I can go upstairs without pain. It's wonderful. And I send everybody I know to her because she's done such a wonderful job for me, and I just appreciate it so much.
Hi, welcome back to The Naked Doctor. I'm Dr. Tammy.
I'm Dr. Debbie.
Fun show. We're talking about intimacy and relationship, and we're calling it the You've Lost That Love and Feeling show. So I think it's really important because we were talking about relationship and vulnerability. And I think one thing that happens is that people take things personally. And so a lot of times I think the lack of communication that happens between a man and a woman, or whatever the relationship is, I'm not saying that they're all heterosexual relationships, but I've even had people tell me that even in non-heterosexual relationships, that they still struggle with all the same issues.
Yes.
So, and sometimes more so because there's extra stresses put on them from the outside world.
Issues. That's right.
So I think not taking things personal kind of plays into if someone doesn't seem in the mood. That's okay, but then you get shut down because you get that rejection, right? And so that can spill over into the relationship for many years to come. And then you also, because you don't want your partner to feel rejected, sometimes you might be intimate with them when you don't want to be. And so then that creates a different dynamic too.
Yeah, particularly if that becomes the expectation from the other partner.
Yeah. And I don't know, being in my 50s, I don't know that things are different for relationships. I think the stress has just increased over time about what's put on people. We've just been through the lockdown season with, everything that we've gone through from pandemics and things like that. And I've had so many patients, relationships break up.
Really?
Because it's like, I don't know if it was because they were home and in each other's face all the time. You hear about that in retirement, people breaking up because they're like, now we got to spend
Too much
time together. Yeah. So, but those are the times, that I think over the years you have to cultivate that relationship and really plan for that. People always say, well, when the kids leave, we'll do this and that. And then what happens if one of them's sick?
Right.
And you can't do that.
Yeah.
So I think you have to have maybe a backup plan.
You have to cultivate friendship
Yes.
before you can expect anything further.
Compatibility for sure.
Yes.
So here's some of the advantages. It's exercise. There you go. Say no more, right? We know the advantages of exercise.
Cancel the gym membership.
Yes. Lower stress, so oxytocin and cortisol and all
Yes.
those stress hormones help balance out as well. Actually decreases migraines in some studies they've found. So it's always like my mama used to say, my brothers and I are all 7 years apart. And she used to say that she'd always say she had a headache, and every 7 years that it just kind of ran out of that excuse. So, but there's studies to show that it actually helps chronic headaches, and that could be through.
Which makes sense from a physiological standpoint due to vasodilatation in your brain as well. Vasoconstriction, kind of the...
Yeah, and endorphins.
Yes.
Because it just feels good.
Serotonin, increases serotonin directly.
Yeah. So lots of great things
Feel-good
there.
hormone.
It can actually increase your testosterone. So especially in men, because it's a stimulation of the organs that make testosterone. So there's a, if the men are needing a good excuse and they want to talk to the woman, they can say, well, if you want more, you have to make more, right? So, and can decrease heart disease and diabetes, and you see the ins and outs of people like with anesthesia and what's going on with different disease processes, and I'm sure you see the complications of those things all the time.
Right. Well, and it's like so many things all interconnected, because with diabetes and blood pressure medications, as you mentioned earlier, that has a negative impact. So production of your own endogenous hormones by things you can do naturally are going to help you avoid things like hypertension and diabetes. And you're healthier when you come for an anesthetic.
That's right. And you have a partner holding your hand, and you have that soothing. And there's tons of studies about longevity. People who are in relationships just live longer.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And again, that increase in confidence, the more you're with someone, the better you feel about the relationship, and the more intimate you are. You really have to work hard to keep that together on both parts. And I know I've seen relationships just crumble because it was just rejection issues started. And that seems like the common thread that I see is I, put myself out there to my partner and they rejected me. And, that just starts a whole cascade of the confidence thing.
Well, and often I think it's because one partner maybe has decided to do things like get healthy, eat right, get fit. That really needs to be done as a couple.
Yeah.
Because that imbalance will further, exacerbate that loss in confidence of the other partner. So
there's a weird phenomenon, and I've actually talked to people about this, and it's like when one partner starts getting fit, it really sets off some red flags and makes sometimes a partner feel really uncomfortable, because they're like, why are you getting fit now?
Yeah.
Who are you getting fit for? You've never done that for me before.
Right.
And so I think that is a really important communication, that I like to get healthy. If you don't want to do it with me, that's okay, but I would prefer that we're fit so we can be there longer for each other. Yeah. So I think that's something that's kind of important to get off the table pretty early.
Absolutely.
So when we come back, we're going to talk about what's normal, how many times a week is, quote, normal or on average, and what is average? Everybody's different. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what you can do about it, and we promised you 3 ways to start increasing your intimacy right away. We'll be right back with Naked Doctor.
I have osteoarthritis, and the arthritis medication that you get regularly will cause your kidney function to go down, and my kidney function had started going down, and so I knew I needed to do something different. I've been seeing Dr. Tammy for about 3 months, and she's been doing stem cells in my knees, and it's like a miracle. She absolutely hits it every time in the correct spot, and I am pain-free now, and I haven't been pain-free for about 10 years. I can go upstairs without pain. It's wonderful. And I send everybody I know to her because she's done such a wonderful job for me, and I just appreciate it so much.
Hi, welcome back to The Naked Doctor. I'm Dr. Tammy.
I'm Dr. Debbie.
We have a great show. We are calling it the Intimacy Show, and we are talking about all things pretty much relationship and what happens with, we call it the you've lost that loving feeling. But sex is a very important part of life, and we're keeping this very PG-13. But I think that's even a conversation that we should have. Using the word sex, it is a medical term. And so I think that if we have more open communication with our children, or if we have more communication with our spouse, it's kind of like we have so much shame attached around that. And so I think it's really hard for people to deal with life and being busy and medical issues and all the things that come into play, and then add a little bit of coating of shame on there.
Right. You look at countries that have greater longevity than us, like in Europe, and areas where things of this nature are viewed as they are, which is natural physiology. And it's much healthier from an emotional standpoint, but also a physical standpoint.
That's a really good point. I never thought about that before, but other countries, it's kind of the reverse. They look at violence as like that gives you the X rating, but then sex is just nothing, It's just like, it's just if we, like you said, the F word.
And nudity.
There's comparison that happens too, and women will pick each other apart, we'll look at the jewelry and the makeup, and men are more, they sort of see, from what I understand, they're more visual, and they sort of see like the whole, almost like the silhouette almost. And so it's like we start to feel threatened by things that men aren't even looking at.
That aren't threatening to us.
Yeah. And we take that personal when, someone makes a comment about, she's this, or, she's got that, or she has pretty hair, or something like that. And so there's like this primitive reptilian brain that starts bringing jealousy and, the fires that really start to, little fires everywhere, but then it like this slow burn that really destroys relationships over time. That goes back to self-confidence too, because the comparison is one of the biggest painful things that you can do. But everyone's got their gifts. I mean, some people are funny and some people are nerdy and smart.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and so everyone's got their value. And sometimes, I know a couple that are absolutely amazing. They're in their 70s, and by cosmopolitan standards, neither one are beautiful.
Right.
But, he calls, her, by these little pet names and stuff, and they're so precious. And you can tell there is just a very authentic love between them, and a cute playfulness that you can tell that they're,
crucial for longevity too, because everybody will change.
Yeah.
And your abilities will diminish. Maybe you're attracted to what somebody did for a living or what somebody does athletically. And as long as, you still see that person and you see that, you embrace that person as they age. I think that's those couples.
Yeah. Yeah, if you want that longevity, for sure, that's got to be there. So what's normal? So some studies show that about once a week and when we say intimacy, we'll just kind of say the sex word. I mean, once a week is what most couples do, right? But there's some studies that also show that 3 to 4 times a week or more is better for intimacy, because there's just that soul connection. There's just that coming together, and I don't know what your spiritual beliefs are, but we know that there are energy fields around us. There's actually photography that can capture that. So when that energy of that closeness comes together, the physiological act of doing that is, I always say, no more than a hiccup or a burp, I mean, but it's that soulful connection. that really makes all the difference. And I
Right.
think that's the difference between people who are more fulfilled in their life. And I'm not judging what's fulfilled or what's not, but that connection has all those benefits that we talked about before,
Well, that's why
about longevity.
your son's question regarding pornography, that's the answer. Is that's the hiccup, and at the connection is what really develops.
Yeah, that long, healthy,
Yes.
that makes us human and gives us both comfort and spontaneity at the same time. And low T is a big deal, so we kind of talked about that a little bit. So that's really important to get your hormones checked, know what's going on there as well. So the three biggest ways kind of play into, let's talk about doing something different, right? Because we like the comfort and we like the, just that safe feeling, but what can you do to do something different? And one of the things I think is, everybody's always like, give the woman flowers, show up with something. I don't know about that though, because we kind of get in these places where it's like, what did he do wrong? Like,
Right.
what are these flowers for when you've never gotten flowers before?
Yeah.
So I think spontaneity should be a mindful thing, not like one day, like I'll send her flowers in exchange for something else.
I was going to say, what's the expectation? That seems more like a trade.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would think maybe more spontaneity would just be something more like, let's plan a little getaway or a vacation or something together, or, let's make time for a date night.
Yeah.
I think date nights can be super powerful. And, when we talk about like that, number 2 would be schedule time. And it's sort of the fake it till you make it. And, then it's not that we're taking one for the team as a woman, but it's more that it's important for your spouse to, if it is important for your spouse, to keep that connection. And a lot of times you're tired or whatever, but once you engage in that, you feel better. You kind of get there and then those endorphins start. So at least give yourself and your partner the benefit of the doubt that you might be able to work through a headache or work through being tired or
a bad mood or any of those things.
And I would say, there's a funny joke and it says, no man was ever killed doing the dishes, murdered doing the dishes. So, I mean, there are little things that are a little more spontaneous that you can do, that you can show up to appeal to the woman's emotional brain versus the man's physical brain.
Right.
And sometimes women just want to be listened to. And I think that's a big factor. It's kind of funny because it's like men want to fix everything. And sometimes if you could just, in a vulnerable way, just listen to her talk, then you're going to be in a much better place to have her feel comfortable enough to do whatever happens next. And medical tests, get your hormones checked, vaginal dryness, all sorts of things, pain, discomfort, make sure that you're taking care of yourself medically and getting checked out, and talking to a provider who understands this is very important, which is what we do too.
Listen to that.
Yeah. So a little plug, shameless plug for my books. They're on Amazon. The Testosterone Solution. I wrote this to help men and women understand testosterone, but mostly I call this the pink book, and rather than blue, I did black. So you can check these out on Amazon. Testosterone Solution and Balancing Act. And we do these shows every week. We want to educate you, empower you, give you your power back to have a better, wonderful life. So check us out on Facebook and nakedshow.com, and we're just all about empowerment, and we hope for the best, most empowered love life ever for you, for all the health benefits and just to feel good. We love you very much, and we'll see you back here next week on The Naked Doctor.